Welcome to Just an Average Citizen, the podcast that helps to inform, educate, and empower you to make an impact in Abilene and the Big Country. This is Tammy Fogel, and I'm back with another episode. So thankful you joined me. One of the best things you can do to help get the word out is subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends and family. You can look on justanaveragetitizen.com to find the platform you like best. There's so many of them. Who knew? Before I started this, I had no idea how many platforms there were. So you can actually share this and listen on whichever podcast platform you choose. But it's so good because if you've heard about it, you're starting to learn the importance of knowing what's going on in our community and ways we can actually make a positive impact. And there are a lot of people who don't know what's going on. In fact, it's one of the things I find most concerning and challenging when engaging with my own friends is sometimes they just don't know what to do. And no matter how much I try and tell them, it still just doesn't click. And so it's a process that's going to have to be probably exposed. We have to expose ourselves to time and time again to make sure that we are giving our brain a chance to figure out how to do something new, because I guarantee none of you have seen this modeled very well. There's some great examples of it, but not in our own community for sure. In fact, everything I've done, I've taught myself because there was no one saying, hey, let me show you how. Now, what's fun is along the way, I meet others who have done the same thing and we get our paths cross. And so it's fun to compare notes and say, oh, did you have any help? Nope. Okay. How do we do it? And then, learn from each other, but never any elected official is helping me or city staff or people who've really walked the ropes. It's kind of like you have to figure it out yourself. So I'm trying to help make that easier and make it less frustrating because I'm showing you the ways not to do things by telling you what works, because I've tried everything. I've worked through this a lot, and I've learned the best path forward is not always what I thought starting off. And so I think that's good, and I hope it's helpful. And I've seen some of you try and share this podcast, and I've seen there's some new followers on our page, and that is so exciting to me because, again, I'm not trying to do anything except expose what we were supposed to do in our city anyway, what our role as citizens are. And I wear this name tag that says Just an Average Citizen because I want everyone to recognize that we need to change the level of average. We used to think average meant that we just trust our elected officials, let them do their thing. We stay in our lane. They stay in their lane. The church stays in its lane. Christians don't mess with people and their beliefs, when we've really not understood history and how our nation was created to do the exact opposite. It's so interesting to me that many people just want Christianity left out of our nation, but the problem is it's in its foundation. It is woven through every part of everything we've created, and to take that out would mean that we don't have the nation that has provided freedom for so many people. And so I learned a new level of excitement and love of country and state when someone introduced me to a section of the the Texas Constitution. And I thought it was a great way to segue into what I wanted to touch on briefly for what happened at the city council meeting, because I kind of alternate between city council meetings and podcasts so that we're not overwhelmed with too much information. And, I get paid all the big bucks to do this, so it helps keep things a little bit more balanced and predictable on my end. So I created this graphic. It was just my way I like to make things easier to read. And so in the Texas Constitution, chapter 552, it talks about Public Information Act. And I want to read to you what it says because I think we have lost the ability to understand this. And if you've been around me for a hot second, you've probably heard me mention this because it has so impacted me and how I perceive and understand how to navigate through things better as an average citizen. So it says, under the fundamental philosophy of the American constitutional form of representative government that adheres to the principle that government is the servant and not the master of the people, it is the policy of the state that each person is entitled, unless otherwise expressly provided by law, at all times to complete information about the affairs of government and the official acts of public officials and employees. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. Man, I just think that's so cool. And I did obviously highlight some words read that is important. We are a representative government, a constitutional republic, not a democracy. And I know that people are like, representative democracy is kind of the same thing. Actually, it's not, because if you actually look up some of the quotes from our founding forefathers, they say that actually they avoided democracy on purpose because it leads to tyranny, and they didn't want that for a nation. That's why they established a constitutional republic. Now, I was scared to say that out loud because I thought people would laugh me out the door. But what I realized is we were all taught that in schools, and our schools failed to actually, well, I think they were successful, but they were not intentionally trying to tell us what our nation was. They gave us this line about being a democracy. So it's going to take a while to get that out of our verbiage, because even elected officials that I respect, they still talk about our democracy and protecting the democracy and this and that. And so here it is a representative government. It's a servant. The government is a servant, not the master. And we are entitled to the complete information about the affairs of government. Did you know that? It's our right to know what government is doing. And in the day-to-day business, now there are some limitations, and that's what they take care of in executive session, but there's a limitation to Chapter 380, which I'm not going to go into tonight, or on this podcast, but there are some things that are available for us. But the problem is we don't know how to use that tool. And that tool is called a public information request. So all you have to do is fill it out on Abilene. It's real easy. You fill out a line, you ask for the information. Sometimes it is actually documents that were presented in a meeting that didn't make the agenda packet, or maybe it's some additional information about this or something. There's lots of reasons to look it up, but everyone elected in the government should know that their engagement on government business is public record and available. And it's not scary, and it's not because you're out to be on a witch hunt. I found some interesting information on how the Visual Arts Jury Board performs its business and doesn't perform its business and things like that. So it's sometimes you're looking for something specific, and sometimes you're just looking to see what is actually going on behind the scenes that maybe you weren't a part of that conversation. So it's something very common, and it shouldn't be a big deal. And it's part of what our Texas Constitution empowers us to do. So there's you a tool. And I love that it says, the people, in delegating their authority, do not give the public servants, the government, the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them. So let's go to City Council. I just want to touch briefly on this. There's two parts of the meeting, or basically there's two parts of the meeting. There's the consent agenda and the regular agenda. The regular agenda has different individual items that are presented on their own, and then they're voted on their own and typically have a public hearing. The consent agenda is voted on as a group, and unless a city council member or a citizen asks for them to be pulled out and separated and voted on individually, it's just voted on as a group. So because I've learned that through the years and through figuring out how to do this, I just simply email a council member and ask them to pull an item for me. And I thought it was great this time. One of them asked me why I wanted to do it. And I was like, because I just want to know more information. They're like, oh, well, I want to tell the city staff. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. Tell the city staff so they can be prepared to present. Because typically you're not anticipating the directors to presenting on information on the consent agenda because it's typically passed. So most of the time they're not prepared for that. I thought it was great. And another council member actually wanted to pull the same one, and it was number 8 on the agenda packet. And I wanted to share it because I knew most people weren't going to look at the actual packet, and it was good just to talk about. And so it was actually in regard to what has happened, what some purchases we've had to make in terms of the cyber attack. And I don't remember, maybe it was in June, was the last time they actually gave some kind of update, and it was because they needed money. Or I think that's what it is. I remember it was almost like $1 million. And now they're saying that they had to spend $1.4 million already on these particular servers that they had been loaned. And they're going to need another additional 1.2, I think, or something like that. Almost $3 million is going to be needed to purchase some things that were needing to be replaced because of the cyber security attack. And I think that's important for you to know, because you need to know we're spending money. And through that discussion, it was a good discussion. I was very grateful because I learned that they're trying to get insurance to reimburse it. There's a $75,000 deductible, which they've met, but they're having trouble with the insurance company actually reimbursing them, the city, the money, which means our taxpayer dollars are not being reimbursed by insurance, but we're actually having to pay it out of our minor improvement project fund, which was not planned. And that has another conversation for that altogether. So I just wanted to let you know, my point was, hey guys, you know that they're not going to read the citizens are not reading the packet. So what would it cost you just to present this to us as citizens at a meeting so that we can know what's going on with these costs of the cybersecurity? And they said things should be wrapped up in October. We'll have to see if that's still the case or if there's more purchases that we need to make in the future. I mean, they told us they were done back in June with this $1 million. And so it's confusing when you now see, oh no, there's $3 million that I believe is a separate entity. So even if I'm wrong about the million, this is still almost $3 million is more than $1 million. And that seems like some bigger cost. Plus, we know there's data that has been lost. Plans will have to be repaid for streets and the water. There's other things going on. So that's really all I think was the big deal. I mean, I got to see some citizens show up and not really understand the process, or I really don't know why they showed up to speak on a public item, an item that wasn't on the agenda and no one else really showed up to speak on. It was kind of interesting to learn what made them think that that was the best place to take care of it. But as just an average citizen, I knew that there's a time and place where I thought that was the right thing to do. And I've learned since then that that is not. And in fact, I told the council I have been working for 3 years to protect the children in our city. And I actually I've been doing it for 4 years. And I've always had a message that I want to protect children. And when other people like to twist and make things out to be of what I do or don't do, it's really fun to come back and say, listen, I'm on the public saying protect our children. And if you protect our children and you don't mess with them, then you probably aren't going to mess with me. But it was definitely an interesting morning for sure. All right, let me move into the thing that I think is very interesting to point out. First of all, I'm sorry I've gone this far. I got distracted with the city council meeting. I'm just going to say it has been a hard week for me and a lot of people in this country because sadly, Charlie Kirk was assassinated in front of a bunch of college students in Utah. And I think it's just tragic. It's tragic when a man who has been the model of civil discourse has just been assassinated. There's just no words for it. And I think what I loved about Charlie Kirk is that he did show me what it looked like to engage with people who didn't agree with you and to try and find some points of agreement so that at least you could agree on something before they walked away. Now, some people were unwilling to do that, but I loved his understanding of facts and I loved how he put himself out there. And if he didn't know the information, he offered up that he didn't know the information and learned about it. And, it takes a lot of time to engage with people and a lot of patience to do it the right way that people felt honored, even those who didn't agree with him. And so it's sad to see someone so mischaracterized by people who will take his quotes out of context or say things about him that they don't provide evidence for, and they just continue to build up the hate in our nation that has caused so much division. And I think once we get away from that false rhetoric of just saying someone is a certain way because of something we've heard or something we think. My favorite thing he would do was when people say you're just a racist, he said, okay, well, what's something racist I've said? And no one could ever bring up anything that he said he was racist because that's who he was. He was a man of God who loved Jesus, loved helping other people know about Jesus, and wanted to do his part to do whatever we could to save this nation. And I've been inspired by him and am motivated by him. And I know many of you are, and want to be part of that, where it says, I am Charlie, I am a million, there are a million Charlies. We're going to stand up and do it, and we're going to make a difference. And that it fits so perfectly what I'm trying to do with being just an average citizen. And while I'm a small fish in the big pond, he was definitely an amazing inspiration, and our nation will be forever impacted from this day forth because of what he did and how we will respond to that. And I'm excited to see the restoration of civil discourse and being able to talk about things so that we can become understanding of what the real circumstances, not the narrative that are being shoved down our throats. And even in our local community, 2 teachers thought that they could just be disrespectful and inhumane and make fun of a man who was murdered in front of, so many people have seen the horrific act. Even if you didn't want to, you've seen it. And for them to be so blatantly disrespectful, it is fitting that they were forced to resign. And it brought back hope to me that Abilene does care and we do have a voice. And when it matters, we stand up. And so that's why I'm excited where we're going and the inspiration we will pull from this tragic event that happened in our nation. And, on the same week as 9/11, there's just a lot of moving parts. And And there's a lot of things that are just hard that we're walking through as a community, and we just need each other. And I was so inspired by someone who said, I didn't really want to go to church. I never really thought I needed church. I love Jesus. I'm a Christian until this week when I saw that I missed the unity that many Christians had by gathering together. And so this gentleman decided that he wanted to get back into church. And I think that's amazing. Again, because when we're around others who are like-minded and have that biblical worldview, we're going to respond better and not back down from standing up for righteousness. And that excites me. And you're probably like, hey, I just want to know about the city. I'm like, well, here's the deal. The city needs more people willing to stand up for righteousness to restore our community, which allows me to segue into the next part, which is, I don't have a slide for it or anything to say, but I've been really processing how government works. And there's a place and a time for every part of it. I love how our founding fathers established a balance of powers. The legislative branch is the strongest. I get so frustrated when I hear people say three co-equal branches. No, they're not equal. They're not all the same. The legislative is the most powerful, and then the executive is the next most powerful, and the weakest by intent is the judicial branch. And for most of my adult life, if not longer, the judicial branch has been the strongest. And so our whacked up balance of powers has really caused a lot of problems. And so we've got to get it right back in order. But also on that note, we as citizens have been told, like I said earlier, that we're just supposed to trust the elected officials. We're supposed to let them do their job. I've been called out on several occasions that I try to micromanage their job and need to leave them alone. Or I not that I need to leave them alone, but I'm micromanaging them and I need to trust them more. And the problem is what I've seen, I don't trust. And so I'm trying to figure out what's going on so that I can find a place where I can trust them so that I can build on that and establish a better path moving forward. But it's been very difficult because there's a pretty significant issue. I emailed several of them on, and not one of them responded to my knowledge telling me what the outcome of that was. And to me, that was just really disheartening because I always tell them I want to champion what they're doing, but when they can't even just follow up and say, listen, here's the result for now. It was just very discouraging that all that I had worked towards felt like it didn't matter so much. But that's okay. I'm not behaving based on their reactions. I'm behaving based on what God's called me to do and the actions that I need to do to make sure our community is the best it can be. And so one of the things I've learned is that as we, as a body, just trust our officials and let people do it who know what they're supposed to be doing, we kind of are silent and we don't really engage or pay attention. And it's really troubling because what I have found in the last 4 years of trying to protect children is that there are different steps that need to be taken. And the first step I took was saying, hey, city, you have some ordinance on your books that actually would protect children. Would you do that? And they're like, nope, we're not going to do that. And I was like, that's not fair. Hey, city, you're supposed to enforce the laws that you pass in your charter. And so I reached out to people who knew more than I do because that's what I do. And they're like, oh, Tammy, we think this is a great case. We want to help you figure out how to solve this problem. And then they're like, oh man, we messed up. I hate to tell you this, but the city doesn't have to do anything to enforce any ordinance it doesn't want to enforce. And I was like, oh man, that stinks. And so when we were coming up with this recent BYOB permit ordinance, whatever, I was like, why are y'all passing it? It doesn't matter. You don't have to enforce it anyway. It's just on paper. And believe me, we have too many ordinances that are not really applicable today. We need to clean house and make it easier for average citizens to be able to read through that charter because it's pretty thick, or the charter of ordinances. And so I learned that the city can pass laws. Other city officials can pass laws. And then later on down the line, the people who are in charge don't have to. And that's really discouraging to me as a citizen. And I would like to have said, I was just like, okay, let's keep going. Well, the problem with that is when the city doesn't enforce an ordinance, guess who doesn't either? The police. So if we have some people breaking the law based on what the charter says, the city can say, hey, police, we're not paying attention to that. You can overlook that because it's not a big deal to us. And that's kind of frightening to know that the city tells the police how and what to focus on. So in light of what happened with this recent THC, is that what it's called? I'm speaking off the cuff and I shouldn't, where they had a search warrant for a particular business and raided it and found things. And now there's a lawsuit for it. I mean, that makes me go, well, who enforced that? Who said that was a good idea? Was it the police? Or what did the city say, go for it, we'll support you? Who knows? Because again, if the city doesn't require it, the police don't have to stand by it. And I've asked them, will you support this? And they're like, nope, that's not a priority for us. You can't prove your case. And I'm like, you mean you're not going to enforce it? So that leaves us in a conundrum. When we see something wrong in our city and we cannot get the city to enforce ordinances or write laws, and the police will not enforce said laws, what do? Do we just give up and throw our hands up? No. That's where I came back to this Texas Constitution right here. It is a representative government, and we have to we have to make sure that the government, which is our servant, knows what we expect from them. And so we, the community, sometimes have to step up and say things to make sure that the government, the representatives, and the servants know what we expect from them. And right now they're confused. So it's important that we, the community, make sure that we're letting our voice know of what we allow, what we will allow, and what we will not allow in our community. And whether or not they enforce it is not the point. The point is they will have to answer to us eventually, because there's going to be election next spring for mayor, and there's going to be 2 council positions that are open, running. And I don't necessarily am saying we need to get those people out, but elections are where we get to restore order to the things that matter to our community. So when your voice doesn't matter, know that it does matter and you will have an impact, but we've got to understand that we have to step out, we have to be confident, and we have to say this is not okay, or this is what we require of our community. And there's lots of opportunities to do that. The thing is you've got to figure out what is actually the true voice of the community. And as one who's been asking in, what is it called? I've been doing little informal polls, asking people what they think about a particular topic. I find that the community actually is in sport, and I can stand before the council and say, hey, guess what? City council? This is something that matters to all the people in the community, not just one person standing up here or one small group. And I actually found a law that enforces, or actually restores order back to what our servants are supposed to do for us as the community. And let me show you what that is. Okay, so as in all things, it's always fun when you find stuff out. So I was just looking up a recent Fifth Circuit court case that came up, and I typed out the entire word, and then I came here and tried to open. Where did it go? I tried to open up so I just want you to see we have Just Deal Law, Texas Scorecard, Facebook, Texas Legislator Online, Facebook, Scorecard. Okay, I looked up a very specific Texas Family Project, Llano, Bonnie Wallace. Google won't show me anything. I just think that's crazy, but I wanted to show you the actual article, and look, I did it on DuckDuckGo, and it came, look, it's the first one on top. Isn't that crazy? Not even on this one, on any of the pages, but here it is. So I just wanted to read this to you because this is for May. I did read this to the council. Let me see here. It's a little bit too close. So let me see if I can back it out, because, we have all these fancy technical tools to help us do the things that we need to do while we're making videos. Okay, sorry. I'm about to wrap up, I promise. So this said 2 things. I really, really, really love what this reminds us of. So basically, this lady, Bonnie Wallace, stood up in Llano and said, we're not going to let obscenity be in our library. And her and the library board took it all away. And then the people who were on the board beforehand were like, wait, we don't think that's right. You can't do that. So they sued her and the library board, or maybe some of the members, I don't know exactly right. And it went to an ASU graduate who was the lawyer or the judge at the time. And he said, oh, yep, you can't take bad books out of the library because it is a First Amendment right to have access to whatever books you want. And so then they appealed, and it went to the Fifth Circuit, and they said, oh, nope, it's not a First Amendment right for you to have whatever book you want in the library. And it's okay for the library to limit what books are in there because it's a public institution. And I love that because, again, many people in our community think their First Amendment rights trump others. And here's the thing, a First Amendment right is to protect you. It doesn't take away from others. And it's very important that when we're dealing with children, it is okay to protect them over adults. So if we're talking adults, it's not a big deal. They can do what they want. We don't have as much say over what adults do in their free time and in private places. However, if you're going to be on public property and doing things with children, it's a big deal, and it's a game changer. And anyone who tries to distract the conversation from children, it's not special, you can't do that, and brings up COVID masks or say that, they tried that before, that's a red herring. It's not, or a straw man. I don't even know which fallacy it is. It is not a real justifiable segue into another conversation. They're trying to get you off the track of what you're trying to say. So let me close with this. Well, let me wrap up with this. It says here that the court decision that I just told you about that said it's not your First Amendment right to have access to whatever books you want in the public library. It says this decision also reinforces a vital constitutional principle. Local governments cannot be forced to promote messages or materials that violate the conscience of their constituents. Remember that? I told you about this. They are a servant to us. And as a community, they don't have to enforce things that violate our conscience as a community. And they are doing that right now, sadly, for some complicated reasons that I'm not going to get into today. But if you ever see me on the street, I'll be happy to tell you, or let's go have coffee and I'll talk to you about why this is so frustrating and complicated. But let me finish with this. It says, this ruling provides a clear legal foundation for school boards, library councils, and elected officials to act boldly and lawfully in defense of children. So when we say, hey, community, hey, Abilene, this is what our community standard is, then it is okay for our representative government to represent us and serve us. And it's okay for us to ask why you aren't doing that. And the more we get up and say, this is what we want, this is what we desire as a community, the more we can, and we do that by being just average citizens. We start communicating with our city council. We start telling them what we want or don't want. And if we're not in the city, you can still reach out and say, hey, this doesn't seem like it looks good for Abilene. Because one of the things I stood up for, they were mortified that I would dare point out the fact that they're choosing controversy. You know, they didn't want to acknowledge that what they were doing was controversial until it was. And then they seemed to blame some of us for saying, hey, that's what we said it was going to happen. They don't like controversy. They don't like having negative attention. They want to support tourism. They want people to come to our city. They want us to be part of the literacy legacy that has sculptures all over it to show people how important reading is. But when we don't protect and defend children in public spaces, they are not representing us well. And I know that I speak for many people. So if you are one of the few watching this that are offended, then you need to recognize that you are not in the majority. And as long as the majority doesn't know what's going on, they're going to be silent. But as they continue to grow, as we continue to remember what Charlie Cook stood for and how we can stand for the same things, and we can require that in our own space, in our own communities, we're going to see a different world, and that excites me. And so I hope that's been helpful. I hope I've explained enough to understand that we can't always trust the city government to do the right thing, and we can't always trust the police to do the right thing. Sometimes we as citizens have to stand up and do the right thing and require others to follow suit. And it matters because we are what wags this dog. No, that's not right. We are what makes things work in the city, and they're to follow us, not the other way around. We're not compliant to them. We're not having to be subservient to them. They are not the master. They are our servants. And let's start making sure we're taking full advantage of that through all the tools our local government and our state constitution and our national constitution gives us. So I hope that's helped you a little bit. I hope you're a little bit more informed, a little more educated, and a little bit more empowered to make an impact in Abilene. Please make sure you subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family. My page, I'm on YouTube. I'm on all the different platforms. I'm trying to make it easy for you to have access to this because they shouldn't be gatekeeping this information. They should be empowering us to make a positive impact in Abilene and the big country. And so I encourage you to do that in spite of all the obstacles that we will have to overcome to experience the beauty of what an amazing community we can and will have in the future. Until next time.